Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome to this Product People event. Before starting, remember that you can see this stream in different platforms such as YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. This talk will also be recorded and saved on YouTube if you want to share it afterwards with someone else. We'll also have a Slido running for you to give us some insights and ask questions directly to the speaker. Tonight's session is Control versus Context in Product Innovation by Mr. Björn Pötter. He is an investor and advisor, and he has also worked as a former VP of product. Before I hand it over to him, let me briefly introduce myself and Product People. I'm Hamza. I have 4+ years in product marketing research and product marketing. I have worked in China, Mobile, Pakistan, and a few SaaS companies and finance companies. I'm an associate product management consultant at Product People. So, what do we do at Product People? We are interim or product or fractional product managers. We provide interim product management, product ops, and transformation acceleration services via our in-house staff. And how do we give back? We have free events and talks for one of Europe's largest PM communities with over 60,000 members. Before I give the speaker the stage, I would like to just thank you all for attending and be sure to be present. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end. I am now handing over.
Yes, thank you very much. So am I on screen now? Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the possibility to talk a little bit about my experience in product innovation. I have worked basically in different careers. I started as a scientist, but I spent 20 years in aerospace and defense, mainly in Airbus and associated companies. And since roughly 5 years, I've been now involved in the startup world. And what I try to find a framework for combining these two experiences, the corporate world and the startup world. This is what basically motivated me to summarize my experiences in this talk. And I have a theoretical part where I try to develop a framework in which I can locate my experiences, and then I'll move on to the more practical part. And of course, I'm starting with theory because nothing is more practical than a good theory. I wanted to recall basically starting with different innovation regimes, following here the model of Clayton Christensen, and as a reminder, basically come to the different innovation regimes, where we have disruptive innovations, which usually are addressing new markets and creating new markets. They also create new jobs. They come up with very new products, sometimes pretty radical products. And they use usually a lot of capital. After that first phase, typically we move on to sustaining innovations, where we see entry of more competitors into the same market, and we see more incremental innovation taking place, which then moves forward typically to efficiency innovations, where the goal is to become very profitable and to improve on all types of improvements within the product and in the innovation chain. So the question is now, how can we prepare organizations for these different innovation regimes? And the model I brought up, or I thought about, that could capture different types of innovation pretty well, is a model that was introduced by David Snowden, called the Connection Framework. And it is basically about explaining how systems behave under different types of constraints. So basically, we have 4 different regimes, which we call clear, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And they are distinguished by different types of constraints that can be used. So in the clear domain, typically there are no degrees of freedom. And if we think about an organization, a company, where we have different organizations, different humans playing together and communicating, dynamics evolve, and we see we're trying to have very tightly constrained boundary conditions and to have no degrees of freedom. These are clear situations. Moving onwards to complicated regimes, we only have governing constraints, so we loosen up the control a little bit, and we see that all the different elements of these systems are more tightly coupled, no longer completely without any freedom. And then moving forward to complex regimes where we have only enabling constraints and the systems are loosely coupled. This is typically where novel things happen. So whereas on the right-hand side, we have so much control that we are trying to avoid new things, on the left-hand side, we are in a regime where new things can happen. If we then completely remove all constraints and we have all the system elements decoupled, we are basically in a and as said before, on the right-hand side, we see that control will enable to control outcomes and also to reduce risk. Typically, we look at situations, we analyze the situations, and then we respond. Whereas in the more complex regimes, we can only control the context. So we have much less influence on individual parts of the system. We accept some risk. We have more a trial and error approach to systems. We probe them, we sense, and then we respond. Chaotic regimes typically, when you are moving into these regimes unintendedly, you want to get out of them pretty quickly because usually these are high-risk regimes. Now, if we map the different parts of innovation to this, we will see that for having efficiency innovations, we want to control the systems pretty much. So we want to be basically in systems that are highly constrained. Sustaining innovation typically happens with existing products where you will use engineering approaches, and the disruptive innovation is usually in the complex domains. If you move even forward to the chaotic region, you will have radical innovation. Now, if I try to map various approaches of models that people are using typically in these regimes, you will find like typical engineering practices, the V model, system engineering, body of knowledge, and so on, are typically for complicated systems. In the aerospace regime, you would have an upgrade of an engine system, for example, where you need to get a cross-functional team together, but try to the typical engineering methods that you have to control your system. If you go to the clear regime and you want to really become very efficient in innovation, you are typically in manufacturing regimes, in automation regimes. For example, model-driven development would be a typical method that we would use in software development to really become very efficient. In order for these methods to work, you need to have them highly controlled and very, very much restricted. This is a very different regime from the complex regime. You really want to get novel insights, if you want to have disruptive innovation, you need to have you need different approaches to innovation than the ones that we've seen on the right-hand side. And this is where typically frameworks like the DARPA framework or skunk works come in, or that's also typically where startups work. And here you can more control the context and really control all the different parts of your innovation system. And it's interesting to look at the preconditions to move into this region. So you basically try to loosen up the control. And what we will see in the upcoming examples is that preconditions for innovation are not really creativity, that has been pointed out by David Snowden very nicely, but it's more like scarcity of resources, time pressure, and the change of perspective that bring these teams into a regime of disruptive innovation, which enables them to really come up with novel topics and novel ideas. Skunkworks is also something where you have small temporary teams, fully empowered, flexible teams, and the focus is on experimentation and improvisation. So this is the framework that I want to use, and I'm now moving on to. This is maybe I forgot to mention that in between the different regimes, we have some other methods like agile, design thinking, lean startup, that are in between complex and complicated regimes. This is an attempt to put them somewhere on the chart. You do not give up all control, but you still want to focus on experimentation and trial and error. I'm trying now to map that onto my experiences, and of course, whereas the theory is the pure thing, in theory there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice there is, and we usually see a mixture of all these different things. I'll start with an aerospace example which describes a very successful innovation, which has to do with a lot of incremental innovation. So the Airbus A320 was a program that was kicked off in 1981, first flight in 1987. And it is actually one of the most successful commercial aircraft programs worldwide. Initially, when the product was put on the market, the invented this thought there might be a market of 10 aircraft a year. And meanwhile, I think Airbus is producing 900 aircraft. And in total, there are 19,000 ordered aircraft here. Total revenue of $1 trillion US. And what is very interesting is to look at the different types of innovation that went into the system. And we see that the first initial innovation that we could call disruptive in the first release of the aircraft was the fly-by-wire design. It was the first aircraft, the first commercial aircraft that had fly-by-wire design. It had a digital glass cockpit. And at that time, that was really disruptive. That was bringing a whole market. After this initial impulse, there have been many innovations that were very impressive, but not disruptive in the sense of Clayton Christensen. And I would call them more sustaining innovations, so like carbon fiber introduction, LCD upgrades of the cockpit, sharklets, and so on. The new engine option was one of the more bigger changes to the aircraft, but form and the functionality of the aircraft basically stayed the same. What is also very interesting is along the line with every batch, the aircraft became better and better, especially also in manufacturing. So there were a lot of efficiency innovations across the whole value chain. And over the last 30 years, the overall emission per passenger has been reduced by an impressive 50%. We see here how an initial first disruptive innovation is followed by a lot of sustaining innovation. And from the organizational side, working in Airbus, I can see that we are really in a regime which I would call pretty much controlled in the engineering, and in the manufacturing regimes highly controlled. So there's a lot of control that the organization is bringing up in order to make the aircraft very efficient, to make them very safe, and to make them very profitable. There was, when I entered Airbus in 2001, 2002, in the regime of military aircraft, the top management had realized that there was a new upcoming technology which was becoming very relevant for the military aircraft regime, which was uncrewed air vehicles, so autonomous vehicles. And within military aircraft, the insight was we were 10 years behind the competition from the United States. So there was the attempt to set up a program and to leapfrog with an innovation attempt the industry. And this led to a program called Barracuda, a demonstrator program to show the new technology could enter new markets. And top management was wise enough to realize that within the traditional context of the EADS military aircraft, which is the predecessor of Airbus defense space, it was not wise to try to do a disruptive innovation in the organizational setup that was established at that time. So the idea was to set up a skunkworks project, and we see that all of the different elements of disruptive innovation in the more complex regime that we have seen on the theoretical side, we can find them here. So the organization was deliberately isolated from the corporate environment. The team was a mixture of newbies that didn't have any experience in the aircraft industry, like myself, for example, and experts, but not too many of them, so a few experts. To avoid any kind of politics, the team members were only temporarily assigned to the project. There was full empowerment of the project manager, and there was a lot of flexibility with respect to processes set up. And the focus was totally on experimenting to learn quickly. We had a lot of time pressure, which was for the newbies, it was not clear that we had so many time pressure. Nobody told us that it was basically impossible to develop a flying aircraft within 2 years, an autonomous aircraft. We had very limited resources. And because we had such large time pressure, we basically had to develop the aircraft around spare parts, because the lead times of all the different elements were so long that it would have not been possible to develop the aircraft within 3 years. So we basically leased an engine, we took spare parts from Alpha Jet for the landing gear, and we integrated a lot of different parts, and also came up with carbon fiber technology, which was the most flexible to build basically an aircraft around these different parts. Originally, we also started as a mission to have a weaponized uncrewed air vehicle, which then, because of the customer feedback, changed to ISR, which is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, which means that it is basically a surveillance mission that we were attempting. Surprisingly, it was possible to build this aircraft, and we had a first flight in April 2006. Very successful, but obviously we have been a bit quick on some of the processes. So what happened later was that we had a crash of the aircraft in September 2006. At that time, the big organization already had taken notice of this big success of having this first flight of this new aircraft. And became in the position to now start to control this whole system. So the whole setup of having a disruptive innovation the organization tried to reintegrate the system into something that was a very controlled environment. After the crash, there were a lot of investigations, there were a lot of discussions committees to bring this and on track, which basically only led to a delay of the whole demonstrator program for 2 years. After that, it was continued. We realized the bill of materials was the smallest part of this program. The learning was much more interesting. So there were, after that, 5 years of continuous ISR missions, which were flown with this aircraft. It's still skunk set up, and we generated a lot of insights and learnings. The interesting thing was now, how was it possible for military aircraft, meanwhile it has had been renamed into Airbus Defence and Space, how to make a product out of that? And the established organization really had difficulties to benefit from this innovation loop. The attempt after the Barracuda has been successful with the first flight was to start a program which was really according to the established guidelines of how aircraft systems should be done. There was a program which was called Talarion. What we see here is just a wooden mock-up. So actually, in the end, after 4 years of development or study, we only produced paper and not something real that was flying, where the organization could learn. Finally, the way to transfer that into a real program was the European male Airbus, which is the medium altitude, long endurance, remotely piloted aircraft system. It consisted not only of Airbus, but also other big players in the many countries involved here. And you can see that the planned entry into service for this program is 2020. So considering that in 2002, EADS had already considered the company to be threatened by being 10 years behind the US competition, 30 years later, we still have not the possibility to get this aircraft into the services that we want to. So long time delays that we have here. Interestingly, what we have seen meanwhile, after the aircraft Barracuda has been retired, has been the design. Whether this is a new design or whether it was copied with pride, we don't know. But the Valkyrie is a technology demonstrated by a producer called Kratos Defense and Security Solutions. And basically, at the same time when Barracuda was retired as a technology demonstrator platform, this program started. First flight, roughly also 3 years after the initial program start. And meanwhile, here the US is interested in a weaponized concept. And what is becoming very, very relevant at the moment is the loyal wingman concept, which was also an idea that Barracuda was taking up. So we can see the market now is ready for these kind of designs. And it would really have been an enormous advantage for Airbus to just turn this initial concept study into a product as quickly as possible. But here we see how the risk-averse culture of the company was basically conflicting with what is probably necessary if you want to become a fast mover in a disruptive market. Finally, I want to mention that we're in Ukraine currently seeing innovation in crisis mode. This is a picture of the company I'm currently involved in, Dropla, standing for Drone Platform. What we see in Ukraine at the moment is that Ukraine really is in crisis mode. Technologies in the Ukraine are constantly evolving. Rapid innovation is giving advantages only in small windows of opportunity. The typical fields in which innovation happens is electronic warfare, drone, software, I think we hear a lot about the speed of innovation that's happening. A lot of press explaining these kind of attempts, and it's very interesting to be involved with this Ukrainian company to see from firsthand how this is really happening very, very fast. The team that we have in Ukraine knows exactly what kind of context they're working on. They're not far away from the front lines. They are using whatever they have in order to set up a system. The company itself is having the mission of demining because of a big problem in mined territories. The challenge here is that with the current resources, demining resources that are available, it would take around 300 years and roughly $30 billion to do this demining with traditional methods. And Dropla aims to significantly reduce the time and cost scale here by reinventing demining using robotics, surveillance robots, and flying robots and ground robots, and using a lot of software systems to identify mines and quickly. So we now see how the traditional defense procurement processes are clashing with what we see at the moment, the speed of innovation that's happening in Ukraine. And it's going to be very interesting to observe how this is going to influence the overall way that industry is probably shaping and reforming. So this brings me to the end. Key takeaways. On the theoretical side, we have seen that there are different innovation regimes, and we need to match our management approaches to different types of innovations that are needed. I think it is important to assess the environment that we're in. We can use frameworks like, for example, the Ganeffian framework. And then we have to decide whether we apply more control-based methods like being process-driven, or whether we allow for more risk, but also more abilities to become novel and disruptive in the innovation, and the focus on empowering teams, experimentation, and flexibility. And for the practical examples, we have seen that long-term success often combines initial disruption with then sustained improvements. Airbus is a great example. If we set up context-driven scout models, we can accelerate breakthroughs. Barracuda is a good example of that. It's also important to move forward with these kind of insights and then benefiting from the technology breakthroughs has to be accompanied by organizations that are ready to take in these kind of innovations. And what we're currently seeing is crisis environments demonstrate the power of very rapid and adaptive context-led innovation that we see at the moment in Ukraine. This is basically my insights, both from the corporate world and the startup world. Concludes my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bjorn. It was a really informative session, and we loved your practical examples that you gave us. We are now going to begin our Q&A session. For everyone watching our stream, please share your questions with us by sending them in the chat, commenting them on any platform that you are on, or you can scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the code you see on the screen. While we wait for the questions to arrive, I will share a bit more about product people in the meantime. Let's talk about the use cases when you may want to work with us. Our interim product managers and owners cover parental leaves, scale your product management team quickly, or lead key initiatives while bridging the gap until a full-time employee joins. We cover parental leaves months or unstaffed permanent positions. With us, you can get temporary help to drive product discovery and delivery for a deadline and create big impact in a short time. We can also coach your product management team to reach their full potential through streamlining processes from 0 to 1, including product ops and program management. And we can also assist you with running the discovery to uncover the next impactful initiative or product out there. Here are a few of our selected B2C clients, including Zalando, Deere, Freenow, Douglas. And we've also worked with a few B2B clients, such as the World Health Organization, Ometria, Sastrify, Elucidat, and more. You can visit our website at getproductpeople.com and see more about us and contact us. It's also worth noting that we have supported over 300 cross-functional teams and 70 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. We have 42 product leaders and product managers in-house to deliver high-quality services to our clients. We take pride in having 62% women in the team with 66% in leadership. Moving on, let's see what questions we have. So the first question from the audience is, how do you decide when to stop working on an idea that's not going anywhere?
Interesting question. So what I've shown here in this context is of course a pretty big program. So that usually is complemented with smaller experiments that have been going on beforehand. So I guess it is pretty important to have kind of smaller experiments that will give you an insight into whether certain technologies work. And the ideal way is not only to test the technology part, but also to include feedback from customers. In the Barracuda program, we actually had customers on the project teams from the first day onwards to give us guidance and to give us an insight into what the customer organizations actually want. And after you've proven that the technology works, which of course in the case of Barracuda was after the first flight, we saw that the customers were really excited about the product and wanted to use it in their operational settings. And I think it is pretty clear that then you have product market fit there, and it gives you a very strong indication that this is. What I also see from other startup experiences, you will probably relatively quickly figure out after the first tests with customers whether something does work or it does not work. So I would say it is more mostly about getting insights and feedback from customers. Don't be shy to ship as soon as you're ready to do that and to learn.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question is, what's one mistake that you often see teams make when trying to innovate?
So the most common experience I had at Airbus was that teams typically were given the task to innovate with the least amount of risk. Depending on whoever was at the management board of Airbus, at which level, and which kind of background these people had, coming either from manufacturing or more from science or more from engineering. There was the attempt to probably reduce the risk by announcing something like first time right, which doesn't work in engineering or innovation. So you have to have the possibility to experiment and deal with failure. And I think in environments that really want to control the outcomes, it is difficult to a really disruptive environment. This is even true for engineering environments, which are much less controllable than managers think. And I also have been in that situation, needed to control organizations. And as a manager, you always want to know what's happening and have to report on approaches and progress. And you might fall into the trap of trying to control more than you should.
All right, thank you. That's valuable advice. We're a bit short on time, so let me move on to the final question before we continue. Our final question is, what's the best way to test if a deep tech idea is worth building?
Just to build it and to push it out in front of the customers. I think that's the only way you can do it. And depending on your appetite on risk, you will take big bets and see whether it works or not. But in the end, as we've seen, disruptive innovation clearly is something that requires financing then.
Yeah, thank you for this. Before we wrap up, I will just share a bit more about product people. Thank you everyone for your questions and answers. If you still want your questions answered, you can leave them down in LinkedIn or any social media. We'd also like to mention that we as in product people are hiring and have the APM and PM roles open. You can apply by scanning the QR code on the left of the screen. I would also like to invite everyone to subscribe to our newsletter, where we share insights and our experiences in product that we gain during the missions with our clients. Our next live stream, scheduled for May 6th, is on applying product management to everyday life situations with Fernando, who is the Director of Product Management at OutSystems. Thank you very much, Björn, for joining us and giving us such an interesting and informative talk. And thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. We hope to see many of you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye and have a good night.